Hello, everyone, and welcome. We've got some folks joining us. We're getting ready to start in just a couple of minutes. My name's Kelly Chicos. I'm a member of the Gray Muzzle Board of Directors, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. As you're joining us, please feel free to drop in the chat where you are dialing in from, where you're joining us from, and maybe a little bit about any of your furry family members that you have. We're so glad that you're here. Would love to know where you're dialing in from. I am dialing in from Tampa Bay, Florida, where it is a balmy 80 degrees today. So we had kind of a cool January, but February is definitely starting off to be hot, and that's all right. So Mentor, Ohio, welcome, Brenda. I'm originally an Ohio gal. Hawthorne, California, wonderful, Eileen. So glad that you're here. Mario from New Jersey. My gosh, I think we've covered all corners of the United States already. You have snow on the ground. Oh my goodness. The beautiful white powdery stuff. Welcome, everyone. And then just for fun, before I turn it over to Dr. Cooney, after I give a quick introduction of today's program, let me share my screen. And we're using some of our Gray Muzzle alumni, if you will, and would love to know on the dog scale, how are you feeling today? Or which one reminds you of you today? Are you feeling like Katie, who's a little snuggly and lovable? Are you feeling like Kula, who dons all of her flowery headgear? Dr. Cooney says Emily, maybe with a little tongue out, a little spicy. Charlie's just chilling with a smile on his face. Chester is happy and interested in what's going on. Sherman's ready to party. Summer's kind of distracted, looking away. Hopefully you won't be that today, and then we've got Rudy's just hanging outside, looking over his shoulder. Also, Marlene's a Rudy. Becky's a Chester. Uh, Brenda's got a Charlie. Oh, like you're all right. That's great to know. It's kind of fun. You can find the alumni stories and all the dogs, or not all, of course, not the thousands and thousands, but we welcome you to visit graymuzzle.org, where you can see how your support helps so many of our gray muzzled friends. And Eileen says, Katie needs some snuggles. I'm with you. I'm with you. This Valentine's week, and our furry family members bring us such love. So again, welcome everyone. So glad that you could take the time to join us on today's webinar around pet memorialization and aftercare. My name's Kelly Chicos, and as a 5-year board member of the Gray Muzzle organization, I am certainly honored to be here with you as we explore one of the most emotional and personal aspects of pet parenting, and that is saying goodbye to our beloved companions. And saying goodbye to our cherished pet is never easy, but having the right information and the right support can help us make decisions that align with our values and provide our pets with the dignity and love that they deserve in their final moments. And that's why we are so grateful to have an incredible expert with us today, Dr. Kathleen Cooney. Dr. Cooney has been a leader in the field of advanced end-of-life care for pets since 2006. And as the Senior Director of Medical Education for the Companion Animal Euthanasia Training Academy, she has dedicated her career to improving the way we approach euthanasia, pet aftercare, and bereavement. She is board certified in animal welfare, an adjunct faculty member at Colorado State University, and a valued member of the Gray Muzzle Organization's advisory board. She also has firsthand experience as the former owner of a mobile in-home pet euthanasia service and a pet aquamation aftercare company. Dr. Cooney's work has brought comfort and clarity to countless pet families, and today she will be sharing insights on key end-of-life considerations, including pet aftercare, options like cremation, aquamation, and burial. as well as preparing for euthanasia with care and dignity, and how we can advocate for what matters most to us and our pets during their final days. What an incredibly important topic. And we are so grateful, Dr. Cooney, to have you here today sharing your expertise. Thank you so much. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that. And as you mentioned, I'm in Colorado. So those of you showing where you are in the United States, I'm probably right there in the middle. Very cold here today. I think we started at maybe 4 degrees. So not as cold as it could be, but I'm very glad to be warm and cozy inside. And right at my feet, I do have a dog with me in the room, which I don't think I've ever had during a webinar. And this time, my little pug, Loretta Lynn, wanted to be here. And so she's at my feet, and I will show you a picture of her a little bit later on. I always say that I love all things old and gray. As someone who has been focusing in on end-of-life work for a long time now, almost 20 years, I certainly didn't think that I would gravitate towards end of life as my specialty within veterinary medicine, but it was a natural fit because loving things old and gray means that I love stories. I love stories. And when it comes to working with families that are certainly going through a very hard and emotional time, preparing for the loss of a beloved dog or any other animal for that matter, I know that they need me to slow down. They need me to take that time. They need me to hear the stories. And it really just has always fit for me. And I'm so pleased to share that there are more and more veterinary professionals around the United States and around the world who are now dedicating their entire career to help you get ready. And really what it's going to come down to is finding partnership with the right veterinary team early on when you're even start to get a little bit concerned, a little worried that the end of lifetime might be approaching. And when I say that there's veterinarians around the United States doing this, there's about, I'm going to say maybe 500 or more veterinarians now that are focusing their entire career on end of life. And then there's going to be that many more technicians, like veterinary technicians, who are doing the same, which is wonderful. And hopefully you have the support that you need in your community. But the more that we pre-plan and think about this difficult time, the better. And it's not to say that's not going to be hard. It's hard to take on that emotional worry and the feelings that come with end of life decisions. But the more that we pre-plan and think about it, the better. So what I'd like to do in this time together is I'm going to give you just some key pointers and things that I have learned over the years of what's helped my clients, these pet owners, to come together to find a lot of kind of synergy within their family and the decisions that need to be made for the best interests of their dog. So I'd like to share those things with you and just give you something to kind of think about and reflect on. And then I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to talk through a bit more specifically on pet aftercare and memorialization. So knowing that these things can be, of course, talked about and planned ahead of time, I just want you to know what's available and what's out there so that you can be as informed as possible. And what we know with the United States, with American culture, is that while we're more comfortable with death than we ever have been before, we're still a bit of an avoidance culture when it comes to death because it is so painful to talk about. And when we love these animals as much as we do, we're often talking about the loss of a family member, right? That's why all of you are here, because you view your dogs and all of your pets as your family. So you get it. It's very near and dear to your heart. But talking about things ahead of time is going to help you to feel more empowered and more knowledgeable. So let's talk first then about just really what it means to consider the end of life time for your dog. Gray, the gray muzzle tells us that age is happening, that we no longer necessarily have the young youthful dog in front of us that we, you know, have had so many adventures with. They're starting to change. And if you're helping your dog age really well, hopefully they're still very adventurous all the way through until they arrive really close to that end of life time. So kudos to all of you, and thank you for the pain management that you provide, the mobility support, the enrichment to keep your dog active and thriving and loving their life all the way through until near that death time. I myself, you're going to see pictures coming up, but I have a 13-and-a-half-year-old black lab and a almost 9-year-old pug who's got plenty of gray. And we know grays can come on early too. Grays can come on very early as well. But usually when we're talking about, you know, them becoming senior at the age of around 7 to 8 to 9, then we do start to worry. We start to worry that things are going to start to affect their body. And a lot of those physical changes that we call age-related changes that eventually get to the point where we know that difficult time is approaching, where they will leave us, where they will either die naturally or we will have to make the choice for something like euthanasia. About 85% of dogs will be euthanized. So euthanasia is the normal course of the end of a dog's life. And the reason that 85% of dogs will be euthanized is because we're helping them, first of all, to live long lives, which means they have a lot of those age-related changes. But because they're living longer, they now have things that are coming on, often things like cancer or, you know, congestive heart failure and a myriad of other conditions. But we're helping them to get those gray muzzles more and more. And then when they are compromised enough, often veterinarians are having discussions with families about choosing euthanasia. So if you yourself have chosen euthanasia in the past, you are not alone. There's a lot of other people that have, of course, gone through that same hardship, the same questions, the same sometimes feelings of guilt that can come from ending a beloved pet's life. But the hope is that whenever we choose euthanasia, we do it at the right time, for the right reasons, in the best way possible. So talk to your veterinary team about what they do for euthanasia. How do they support? Can they come to your home if you want a home service? Or do you need to go to the hospital? Are they available after hours or on emergencies on weekends to help you with euthanasia of your dog if that becomes necessary? What's the plan, right? What's the plan? I always have a plan for euthanasia because that's my specialty. That's what I do. I always have the drugs. I have the supplies. I have the know-how. But I think about what it's like for my families who don't have that and how scary sometimes just day-to-day life can be with a really old and frail dog. So the more that you talk about this with your veterinary team, the more at ease I hope that you feel, knowing that you've got choices. You know what you can do. So we also know in veterinary medicine that veterinarians aren't sure how to broach the subject of something like euthanasia. So if you can tell they're just not quite sure they should even say it, feel free to bring it up yourself. To say, I'd like to know about my euthanasia options, or I've had a certain experience in the past and you know, we don't want to euthanize this time, or we'd like to euthanize sooner than later this time because of what happened before, or we would like it at this location with these people and have a bit of a ceremony. I think all of that is wonderful. So you can feel bold and broach the subject, and then your veterinary team will likely feel more at ease continuing on and explaining as much as the information that hopefully you need. With that in mind, the Companion Animal Euthanasia Training Academy, that's the little acronym that you see up there in the corner. That's my company, and I teach veterinary professionals all about euthanasia best practices, because it turns out that veterinary education actually only teaches just a little bit about euthanasia. We don't necessarily get all the information that we should get in our schooling years. That's the same for veterinarians and for technicians. So we developed over 50 hours of learning for veterinary professionals to help them to get better and better and more confident at euthanasia. And everything that we teach is kind of focused around what we call the 14 essential components of good euthanasia. And I'm just going to talk them through with you ever so briefly so that you can think about what your veterinary team is preparing for. And so there's 14 essential components because there's 14 letters in the two words good euthanasia. So I kind of have this acronym that I follow. So to just give you a sample, we recommend that veterinary teams are providing some sort of grief support materials to help you to move into your bereavement time, right? To help you to grieve very healthy and with support. And so the veterinary team gets to decide what kind of grief support materials they're providing. But we want them to ask you questions about your preferences. So we call that outline caregiver or pet preferences, such as where should euthanasia take place and who can be there, what time of day. How about those special touches that make for a lovely ceremony saying goodbye to a beloved dog, like special foods or music or readings, something that is special to you and to your pet. And then, of course, what's going to be best for your dog? Where are they going to be most comfortable? And do they want to be outside, inside, things like that. Another one is making sure to offer privacy before and after death, if possible. And then to make sure to deliver good, proper euthanasia technique. That's really at the core of much of what I teach veterinarians, is so that they know all the different ways that euthanasia can be carried out, so that they have what we regularly teach as Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C to seamlessly move through the appointment and make sure that your dog has a very peaceful end. Other ones to include are things like the importance of establishing rapport and a connection with you to help to build trust, right? You're really giving a lot of your heart, a lot of your emotion in this moment, and you need to trust. You need to trust that the veterinary team has your dog's best interest at heart and is going to be there and support whatever that looks like to have that peaceful euthanasia that you so want. And we are also teaching veterinarians these days to provide pre-euthanasia sedation or anesthesia. In other words, it is now common best practice for dogs to be sleeping when they are getting the actual euthanasia medication. And not all practices do that, and it is not required necessarily. There's really no law or anything that says that euthanasia must be carried out this particular way. It's just really a preference these days. And that's because so many of us wish that our dogs would pass peacefully in the night and take that decision off of our plate. And so by providing them that pre-euthanasia sleep, that's as close as we can make it to them just passing kind of on their own. And when doing that, then our dog is completely unaware of anything that's actually happening during the procedure itself. So that is becoming more modern best practice, and you might want to ask questions about that to your veterinary team when you're planning for euthanasia. And then just a few more things that are in that 14 essential components list are safe space to gather, inclusion of loved ones, adequate time, and assistance with aftercare. And assistance with aftercare is what we're going to move into in just a moment. So, euthanasia, again, very common out there in our world. A lot of us have to go through it. And if your dog dies naturally on their own, that is also a blessing. The hope is that it's very peaceful and very controlled and, with the least amount of suffering. So just in case you are not sure you want to choose euthanasia for your dog, make sure to talk to your veterinary team about hospice care, about palliative medicine to help to reduce pain and help with hygiene management and nutritional support and those things all the way through until your dog would to be passing away naturally on their own, which is really quite rare, but it certainly does happen. So that is just a bit of background around euthanasia and a little bit on that hospice and palliative care to support you and your dog during those, the end of life, potentially months to weeks to days. And maybe I'll just pause there before I start to show my slides and we move in to that pet aftercare and memorialization information.
Such great information already, Dr. Cooney. Are there any questions? Nothing has come up in the chat yet. But I know that from what you've described so far, Dr. Cooney, it's so comforting in the most difficult decision and almost the last act of love that we can provide our beloved pets. It's wonderful to know that there are people like you who and so many as that number becomes more and more who understand that moment and really go out of their way to make it as pain-free as possible and as special because they do deserve that. So thank you.
That's exactly right, Kelly. And it's really a movement. It's a movement that's happening within the human animal bond and veterinary medicine to say that endings matter, that we're going to give this a lot of attention and care. And what we ask is for veterinary teams to join the good death revolution and to move away from some of the older ways that things used to be done, including for my own pets when I was growing up as a child. Euthanasia today is really quite different. Now, much of that depends on where you are in the world and what's available in your community. But for the most part, it is undergoing a significant evolution. Yeah.
Teresa mentioned the hardest mental block I had to overcome was better a day early than a day late when it comes to euthanasia. What are your thoughts on that comment, Dr. Cooney?
Yeah, I do love this one, and I hear it a lot. What it is avoiding, if possible, is a crisis where the dog might be struggling to breathe, is really high anxiety because they can't move the way they normally move. They might have uncontrollable seizures and those things. You never really always know what's coming with the dog's condition and these age changes. What we have to go on is our best guess and experience, knowing what this condition can do and what's likely. So do follow the lead of your veterinarian. But if in your heart you're not sure if today's the day, and you do have choices and regular access to quick help if you need it, then I do think it's okay to make a euthanasia decision on a day-by-day basis, take it one day at a time. But if you don't have those kind of quick resources in your area where you can just, call up a vet and they'll be at your doorstep in an hour to help with home euthanasia for a really big old dog, as an example, then I do agree and recommend the day early versus a day late, because as far as the animal welfare angle of things, if we can prevent an animal from having to go through that difficulty, then that's the right decision.
Thank you for that. A couple other things. Becky asks, are veterinarians being educated about hospice and palliative care? I do senior and special needs rescue, and I find it's rare that a veterinarian feels comfortable with hospice care.
So the answer is yes, they're getting education, but it's very few and far between. So there's an association called the International Association for Animal Hospice and Palliative Care. That's probably the most active group out there trying to educate veterinarians, veterinary technicians, social workers, as many on the team that want to learn about hospice and palliative care. And a few other groups, myself included. We do a lot of research on it, and there's books written. But there's kind of this idea that if you are providing just some general medications to a dying dog, that's hospice. And it's not quite. Hospice is a bit more involved because we're working with the physical and emotional needs of our patient, as well as the emotional and educational needs of our client. So it's kind of a philosophy of care, and many veterinarians aren't familiar with that. So the best that I can say is that a lot of us out there are doing our part to bring more education. I have an animal hospice club here at Colorado State University. There's some others that are out there for getting that word and that message out there for students before they graduate so they're familiar, but we do have a long way to go. So keep asking questions in your community, find who is available to help. And if you can't find someone, encourage them. Say, here's resources. Here's what I found that maybe can help get you ready to then support the dogs that I'm caring for. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. And Becky, thank you for doing Senior and Special Needs Rescue. That's making the world a brighter place for those very deserving animals. A couple more. Do you have, is that okay, Dr. Cooney, to
Yeah, why don't
continue?
we take
Okay.
about 5 more minutes on euthanasia related content, and then we'll move into aftercare memorialization.
Okay, wonderful. Terry says, is there a downside to not using the pre-euthanasia sedation? My vet, who has been a friend for many years, just 2 weeks ago came to my home to say goodbye to a beloved dog. We're very sorry, Terry, about that. I asked if he used the sedation first, and he said when the dog is as quiet and sedate as mine was, he did not, because he felt using the sedation kept the dog in sort of an in-between state and didn't feel it was helpful in my particular situation. Your thoughts on this approach? My dog was very quiet with his head down and very quickly and quietly seemed to pass.
Very good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. There is no, I'll say, downside when the veterinarian feels like it's not necessary, especially if a dog is very quiet, very comfortable, and will openly receive the euthanasia solution and therefore have a peaceful passing. So as long as the euthanasia solution is given directly into the vein or sometimes into the abdomen, just depending, not that common with dogs and certainly not in private practice compared to animal shelters, as long as the veterinarian is giving that euthanasia solution in the proper way, then things really should be quite smooth. It's for those dogs that are resistant to handling, resistant to touch, might be nervous with new people around, a lot of different energy, and they could just have a bit of that edge taken off. It's also really good for dogs that are in extreme pain, or maybe for dogs that are having a little bit harder time breathing. Some of these meds can make it easier for them to breathe and certainly make them less painful so that families can have that closeness in those final moments that they might otherwise not really get. And I also do appreciate that it can slow things down a little bit and provide more time for stories, more time for offering those favorite foods and really making the connection that makes euthanasia feel a bit more like a funeral type event versus just a clinical procedure. So I think it's dependent on the veterinarian and what they think is most appropriate for your dog or for your pet. But if if you've seen it work well with other animals or have heard good things about it, then you can certainly advocate for it. The veterinarian will ultimately decide what they want to do.
Two more there. What do you advise for doggy dementia in the early stages for an 18-year-old dog?
Routine, routine, routine as much as possible without going into drugs and medications and things like that. Just trying to maintain routine because our dogs thrive on that. And it also is helpful to see what's changing. So you've already been seeing changes from the routine because of this dementia, but trying to maintain routine as much as you can is usually helpful. If need be, I would be providing possibly some what they call anxiolytics, just to take away some anxiety that can happen with dementia. Sometimes we do need sedatives on board to help them to sleep better through the night. But patience is probably my takeaway on this, is patience with these changes and getting a support system around you so that you don't feel like you have to do everything all the time. Hopefully there's other people that can help care for your dog, And if that dementia gets to the point where anxiety is happening all the time, then euthanasia might be the right thing to reach for at some point, because suffering is present. Suffering, in a very pure definition, is anything that denies us our true self. Okay? Anything that denies us our true self is a very basic, fundamental definition of suffering. What we have to decide with physical suffering and emotional suffering is it bad enough? Is it significant enough that death is warranted to release this dog from its body before things get more difficult? Because if we're definitely on this downward slope, and we're inching closer and closer towards a natural death, and our quality of life is quite low, then it is acceptable to release a dog from its body sooner than later, if we know that every day going forward is going to be more and more difficult. So I would just make sure to be talking to family members now about that dementia and getting everybody on the same page. What does a good day look like? What's a rough day look like? And kind of what's that threshold to maybe make a difficult decision?
That's great guidance. Thank you, Dr. Cooney. And one more before we go back to the presentation, and then we'll also have some time for Q&A at the end. Veronica would like to know, it's a two-part question. What is the best anesthesia option? And is there an opportunity to preventatively treat CCD?
And I'm going to say CCD is the same as dementia on this one, canine cognitive dysfunction or decline there, CCD. So let's start with the first one with best anesthesia option. Best anesthesia option pre-euthanasia is going to be either a drug called thalidomide or ketamine mixed in with other drugs to take kind of the side effects of thalidomide or ketamine away. So it's usually an anesthetic drug that's mixed in with other non-anesthetic drugs that make this kind of perfect cocktail for good deep sleep. And I also just want to point out that anesthesia is different than sedation. So it's possible that your veterinary team might be providing your dog with pre-euthanasia sedation or pre-euthanasia anesthesia. And when they do anesthesia, they actually have more options of where in the body to give the euthanasia solution. So I regularly for dogs am either leveraging thalidomide or ketamine, that's here in the United States. And you might have your veterinary team using propofol, but propofol has to be given into the vein. So we recommend using these pre-drugs given under the skin or in the muscle before any kind of restraint is needed to place a catheter in a leg. But once a catheter is placed, then something like propofol can be given, and I imagine some of you have seen that used over the years just before the euthanasia solution is given. So if I'm understanding the question correctly with the CCD, if that is cognitive dysfunction, then I would say the opportunity to prevent it, if there is such a thing, is to lean heavily on things that are going to keep the nervous system strong, such as, really good nutrition, good hydration, things like fish oils and other supplements that are out there. But probably too much for us today, but anything you can do to be preemptive and try to slow down cognitive decline is always a good thing. I would also just add, as far as the household modifications, get your dogs used to things in your home when they're young. So I have a ramp that comes into the dog door. My dogs have been using it since they were young. So even when they start to have cognitive issues and dementia, or they start to lose their vision, they know how to navigate that. They hopefully know where to go and where to find it. I get them used to getting in and out of the vehicle and certain types of handling. All of that you can do preemptively.
Thank you, Dr. Cooney. And thank you all for your questions. Such an engaged audience. We love that. We love that. And it's because it's great content. So thank you. And we will pause towards the end for some additional comments and questions for Dr. Cooney.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull this into full screen. And I think you can see that okay, Kelly?
Yes, but we can still see the note part. So it
Oh,
hasn't
can you?
launched quite into the, or maybe it just was on a different screen. If,
That's okay. Let's give it a go. Nope, that's probably showing the whole thing too.
yes, maybe it's play
Yeah.
from, that's
I'm
okay.
just gonna try it a little different way. And let's go with better.
There we go. Yes,
Okay.
perfect.
Patience. I love it. Thank you. All right, so I just want to give a very fast overview to the different aftercare options that are likely available in your community or nearby. And then we'll spend a little bit of time on memorialization because there are so many different products out there now to help you to pay tribute to your beloved dog. So modern aftercare today really focuses in on allowing a family to choose what they want for their pet's aftercare. So for many, many years, it has been where the veterinarians, the veterinary company, the hospital, they take the lead on making all of those arrangements. Modern pet aftercare is putting pet owners in a bit more of the driver's seat so that they get a chance to see all the different urn options and possibly go to the crematory or make connections with the staff. But I think the main key word here is choice or option. That is more in line with modern pet aftercare. And there are many different ways that you can manage your dog's deceased body. And the purpose for pet aftercare is because we do not need this dog's body the way that it was in its living form. We need it now modified so that so that the body is handled and handled in a safe way that is going to, either return to the earth or you're going to have ashes back. So in this upper left picture, that is what a traditional crematory might look like. So flame cremation. Those ovens are also known as retorts. And you have the choice, depending on the crematory in your community, of what they call private cremation, individual cremation, or group cremation. Group is also known as communal or maybe scatter. So private cremation means that it's only your pet's, it's only your pet's body in that oven at one time. So it's only your dog's body there and only your dog's ashes coming out. Individual means that there are compartments within that oven, and there might be multiple animals in there at one time. Could be dogs, could be cats, could be small mammals, but they are separated by usually like a brick, kind of a brick wall, like a small brick wall, so that we reduce what's called commingling. So ashes and things kind of popping and moving around to different compartments where these animals are. So that's called individual. So you can still have your pet's ashes back with individual, but it means that their body was in the oven, in the retort with other animals. And some people don't like that. They want it just their pet. And then there's the group, communal, or scatter, same thing, where there are multiple animals placed inside of that oven. There is no separation between them. They are connected. And then once the flame has reduced all that soft tissue away, then all those bones are collected out together and none of that ash is returned back to you or to a family. So traditional flame cremation is still the most common in the United States. It's more common than home burial, pet cemetery burial, or aquamation. And aquamation I'll talk about here in a second. So flame cremation, very, very common. Then the next picture here on the top is just an illustration of burial and the importance of preparing ahead of time. And I'm going to show you some recommendations on how to do a proper home burial if that's what you're interested in. So burial at your home or the cemetery is possible. Then this third picture here, this is an aquamation machine. Aquamation is water-based cremation. And this process is known to be a bit more eco-friendly. It is using water instead of fire to reduce the body down, and you're left with very pure, clean bone, considered carcinogen-free, and it tends to have a lower carbon footprint for the planet. And I ran an aquamation facility on my farm for about 9 years in Colorado. That was my machine right there. I had two, and that was one of them. And so this is gaining popularity. It's known as alkaline hydrolysis, water-based cremation, flameless, green cremation. I don't think I said biocremation yet. So there's a lot of different words for it, but aquamation is by far the most common. And in the upper right picture is aquamation ash. That's what it looks like. It's very fine, like baby powder. And the bones are very soft. You can actually just kind of break them down with your hand. So when you actually grind them down, just like they have to do with flame cremation, you're left with more like a very fine baby powder. So it's not kind of a gravelly type of appearance. And then just to promote a few other options for you, this bottom left picture is to remind you about the option of maybe body donation. This was my old girl, Molly, who I adopted at 14 years of age from the Safe Harbor Dog Rescue in Denver, Colorado. We were looking for a younger female black lab, maybe around the age of 1. And Molly's picture came up first as a 14-year-old chocolate. We said, well, we're definitely taking Molly. Now let's see if we can find that younger female to go with her. And so Molly, we had until she was 15 and a half. And I donated her body to Colorado State University for teaching. So that might be something you're interested in too. The second picture on the bottom is a reminder that we can also do different forms of body preservation, anything from skulls to, ears to tails to the paws that you see there for the cat. It really just depends on the companies that are around that are willing to do that. And this picture with the green background, that is a freeze-dried Chihuahua. And there are quite a few freeze-drying companies around the US that will take your pet, and your pet is preserved in its entirety. It is not like taxidermy where things are changed, and I'll just leave it at that. It's freeze drying, and there are quite a few companies. So if it's a Sunday afternoon and you are looking for 3 hours to kill on Google, freeze-dried pets is a good way to go because there's just a lot out there. And then that bottom right picture is composting, that there are now companies that will help with composting to reduce your pet's body all the way down to soil. And that can be given back to you and placed in gardens or under trees, or you can donate it to nurseries or to, national forests and things like that. So those are the kind of typical modern pet aftercare choices today. And this is a study that came out a couple of years ago, looking at whether or not dog owners would be willing to donate their dog's body. And it turns out that many were, when they knew that it was an option. So if veterinarians would open this up and say, here's a choice besides cremation or burial, then, would you like to do this? And a lot of people said yes, they were interested in it. So you would want to talk to your veterinary teams and find out if it's an option. And if you happen to live in a community with a veterinary school or a tech college, they might be more interested in that. Cadavers are hard to come by. Ethically sourced cadavers are hard to come by for teaching. So there's a lot of schools that are interested in it. And you have to keep in mind, though, that you probably won't have your dog's ashes returned to you. But if you can, then of course, that's a really good incentive, as what this study showed. So just wanted to make you aware of it. And I did see some questions come in, and we'll come back around to those here in a moment. If you are considering doing a home burial, then these are usually the requirements that we advocate for. And owning the property yourself or having permission to bury on the property is important. It's much as I've got these beautiful Rocky Mountains right in the distance, I cannot go up there and simply bury my dog. I need to have permission to bury. And to bury, we do need to go deep enough to cover the body with at least 3 feet of earth, which means that we need to go down about 4 feet. And that's not an easy undertaking. So the picture that you see here is not deep enough. They would need to go down probably another 2 feet. And those that have like big actual equipment that can dig down can make light work of this. Otherwise, it can take quite a few hours to properly prepare a burial site. And doing so, you have to be careful of buried power lines and water lines and tree roots, and then try to avoid what's called a flood plain, a flooding area where water will regularly pool. So why is home burial so important? To do it properly is because most of the time veterinarians are putting drugs in the body that would be considered a poison to wildlife. So we need to make sure that the body is protected first and foremost, but we need to protect the wildlife for coming in contact with the dog's body. That's really important. And I think in the future, more and more veterinarians might be reaching for euthanasia drugs or solutions that are less toxic to wildlife, but it's just a matter of time before we, I guess, start talking about that more and more and it becomes commonplace. This was a study that also came out a couple years ago showing what you as pet owners find important for aftercare. So when you're working, when you're working with the veterinary team, that you want your dog's body kind of picked up and transported to the aftercare facility as soon as possible. Number one really is body handled with respect, treating it like it's your own, that even though the body is, no longer living, that it's deceased, it should be treated as if it's still alive, and really, really cared for. You certainly want to know the cost of aftercare. So those are things that you'll talk through the veterinary team with. And it's pretty common to want to know what the urn's going to look like or what the ashes will be contained in if you're having them back. Yes, there is a lot of concern about the body being mislabeled, but I'm here to tell you that that doesn't happen very often with really good reputable crematories or aftercare facilities, whatever that looks like. Their checks and balances are better than ever before. And there's a lot of steps to make sure that that pet that is going into that retort or into the aquamation machine or being buried, whatever it is the proper pet. You want to have the option to have keepsakes and some comfort items sent with your dog. That is proven important. Doesn't always kind of pan out that way because crematories can't always, put everything into that retort with the body. And that's an environmental contamination thing, things going up into the atmosphere, but things can still be kept near the body during that process. And then there is always a concern that you're not going to be able to memorialize your pet the way that you want to. And so that's where that pre-planning is so important. So pet owners are turning to veterinary staff for most of this information. But if you want modern pet aftercare, that means that you're likely going to be connecting more and more with the crematory staff. So find out who your veterinary team works with and contact the crematory ahead of time saying, I know that this is coming up, in a matter of a couple of weeks. We just want to know what you have available. Or maybe, you want to bring the dog yourself to the crematory versus having it stay at the vet's office. That is usually acceptable. So those are the kind of things that you might want to start asking questions about. I think the next one is going into memorialization. There we go. So let's leave it on this pretty picture and see if there's any specific questions about aftercare that I should address first.
So far, Dr. Cooney, there was just comments about how so many of us had no idea about all of these options. I'm fascinated with the different options. And also I didn't even know what the machine looked like. So honestly, that was just really wonderful to be educated and know that those options are available and just have a better understanding of them. So thank you so much. And yes, to those just joining us, there'll definitely be a recording and you'll want to catch it because what's been shared so far has been really wonderful. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I will continue on with memorial items, and then we will get ready for some more Q&A time. So memorialization is really anything you want it to be. How do you want to pay tribute to this beautiful dog's life and these memories, these adventures, just the love that you've shared? How do you want to reflect and show that? that's where the sky's the limit. And when I started into this field about 20 years ago, there was a lot then. And there's a lot now, a lot now. So this upper left picture is just one of the patients that I helped that's owned by a colleague of mine. This was Ruby. And because we had pre-planned ahead of time, the family knew that they wanted to bring in flowers, that they wanted to bring a picture of them camping with Ruby and a few special notes, and I think a little stuffed animal. All of these things went with Ruby for her aquamation. But that is how they paid tribute to her. And I know that they made other things later on, but during the euthanasia, that is the way that they also memorialized, and just to show that extra care for her body. This upper center one I think is fascinating. This is a family that collected fur ahead of time and actually had this, I'm going to say weaved, but had this beautiful 3D sculpted fur artwork created in the likeness of their cat. Thought that that was beautiful. Upper left is an example of a paw print called Paw Pals. Some of you may have used these for your own dogs or other pets, like you see here, this gecko named Petrie, that the full body fits in there. And then it's got a little flap on the side for a picture. So I thought that's quite lovely. This interesting picture on the bottom right, that's actually ashes, ashes that have been formed into stones that you can actually hold in your hand or place in your pocket, or maybe you can stack it up like a kind of like in a Zen garden. So you can actually do a lot of things with ash compared to years past. There's a lovely picture of a clay paw print there that was one that I made many years ago back in 2013 and just thought it came out really well, and that was dandy. And then the picture in the bottom right is ashes that have actually been incorporated into a tattoo. So actually tattooed the ashes directly into the owner's skin. I'm not going to advocate for that because I don't know the process of it. I'm just letting you know that that kind of stuff is out there. Other things that you can do with ash or maybe a little fur clipping or hair clipping is this resin heart that can be produced like you see in the upper left. And then top level there with those little cuties, those are called cuddle clones, where you can make a stuffed animal, a stuffy in the likeness of your dog. And they do it for all different types of pets. And I just thought that one was particularly adorable. On the bottom here, we've got Goober. That was one of my dogs years ago. Goober died in 2013, and I euthanized him out in the backyard. That's where he wanted to be. And after he was buried, actually, we buried him on my farm here in Colorado. We went ahead and put this lovely shadow box together. So if you're wondering what Goober liked to play with, you are correct. It is a tennis ball. That was his jam. And we put his beautiful purple collar in there, a lovely picture of him, and of course, his paw print. And then lastly, just to share with you a bit of the pre-planning that can go along with memorial items are the actual body bags themselves, the transport bags. This is from a company called Euthabag, where you can pre-order these yourselves if you want to have them. Otherwise, your veterinary company hopefully uses them or something similar, or the crematory does, where you're actually placing the dog's body into a leak-proof, sturdy bag that could be decorated like you see here. Now, fun fact in this picture is that the dog that's in the bag is named Darby. She's my dog and she's alive and well. So it's strange things that I do with my dogs around my house, but Darby was heavily sedated for her nail trim and her spa night that we have at my home. And so this is my mother-in-law with her friend, and we were just doing a nice picture that we could use to teach. So Darby is alive and well. But the takeaway on this are there many, many different ways to memorialize your pet. And I do hope that you have taken advantage of these different types of things over the years with your own. But if not, there's still plenty of time with all the others that you adore. We're just about done here with these slides, but I wanted to remind you of this really important concept here is that when words are inadequate, when you just have so much going on in your mind and your grief is overwhelming and you don't know how to support others in your family or your circle of friends, is to consider having a ceremony. Have a way that you can come together and share in that grief, share in that sadness. This picture just happens to be a really cute one. It's my daughter. And one of my gray muzzles down there in the corner in the bottom left is Daisy. And what you're looking at in this picture is a little homemade funeral for a moth that died. It was a moth named, I think Rusty is what they named him. And so my two daughters are holding a funeral for this moth. And my daughter has lined up some of her stuffed animals with tissues in honor of this little ceremony. My other daughter is off camera and she's up at an altar type setup and she's officiating over this moth's funeral. But the message is grief needs to be witnessed. And so coming together and talking about these feelings and sharing of these stories can be extremely powerful. So what do pet parents look for in an aftercare service? These are all the things that I imagine are important to you. So please be talking to your staff about it ahead of time, talking to the veterinary team. And what I'm always out there preaching and teaching is the importance of the veterinary teams going to the crematories and seeing what's available, as well as putting more and more information on their website so that you can just go to the veterinary, team's website, to the company website, and learn about what they do with aftercare, learn what they offer for memorialization. And if your hospital that you work with doesn't do that, you might actually want to encourage them to do is say, hey, wouldn't it be great if you could get more information on your website about aftercare? And then they, as well as you, please feel empowered and emboldened to go and take a tour of your local crematories or pet cemeteries. I love Stephen King novels and all that, but the book Pet Sematary did nothing good for the pet cemetery business because it just gave this feeling of really creepy and dangerous. But they are often beautiful locations where you can find great peace and, of course, make the connection with the team and see what all of those options are. And my guess is you're going to be pleasantly surprised. You're going to be pleasantly surprised. So I'll go to my last picture there and we can have some Q&A. I'll just show this and then I'll stop sharing so you can see me maybe a little bit more up close as I answer questions. But let me just introduce you to these beauties. So on the bottom left is Eleanor. She's my old girl. She's the one that I adopted with Molly, that 14-year-old chocolate lab all those years ago. So Eleanor now is about 13 and a half and still looks pretty much like that. That picture was about 2 years ago. And then the dog on my lap is Darby Jane. She was the one that you just saw in that body bag picture, which again looks so weird, but there's Darby Jane, and she's also a gray muzzle. She's almost 9. And then the dog snoring underneath my feet right now is that black lab up on that top step, and that is Loretta Lynn. And we always joke that Loretta's in charge of security around here. So all the dogs need their jobs, right? And Loretta Lynn's is security. So with that, let's just wrap it up with some questions or comments.
As for waiting for others to drop in, there's been a couple comments that people, again, are so interested in the way you can memorialize your pet. And so we were just sharing some, quick Google search might find whatever, unless Dr. Cooney, you have somebody that you recommend but otherwise just.
I have right here next to me, there's companies out there that sell a lot of memorial items. This is one of them. It's called Veterinary Wisdom. And they make the original clay paws kits, and you saw one of those. That's the one that said Dandy on it. So they have tons of different products in there to give you an idea. But I would just Google pet memorial item or dog memorial item or unique pet memorial items. And then Etsy has a zillion. You can't go wrong with Etsy. With different things, everything from unique ways to capture paw prints or nose prints, fur clippings. Yeah, lots of options.
Wonderful. It's this, you mentioned it earlier, the human animal bond, and in the life cycle of our beloved pets, that final stage, what you've provided with us is that information, education, and assurance that we can make that final stage beautiful and peaceful and kind and loving. And as difficult as it certainly is, doing the things that you suggested today and it gave us the education and options just makes it so much more manageable. And I know somebody in comments earlier had remarked about how some of their family members don't want to have pets anymore because of a traumatic euthanasia experience, at the vet office or whatever it was. And oh, what a shame that is when so many need homes, but understandable that you don't want to put yourself through that. And just, all of us as pet parents can now make sure that we prepare in advance, and so that we can make as many wonderful, kind, loving decisions.
Thank you. Thank you. That's well said. We are preparing to do some research in that exact area to find out if families had a difficult euthanasia experience, if they're less likely to adopt again, and are they less likely to adopt a senior? We want them adopting seniors. That's so important. So with good euthanasia experiences, we're hoping that families feel more comfortable and say, well, if I have to go through this again in a year or whatever that is, I'm prepared for it. I'm emotionally prepared for it. I'm knowledgeable about it now, and I'm less afraid. So knowledge really does reduce fear, and fear can be crippling at the end of lifetime. And it does tend to build a lot of regret. So I'm so thrilled for all of you to have joined this webinar to learn, to gain some insights, and hopefully spark an interest of you to continue exploring this, to build up more and more knowledge, to get you what you really want, the way that you want to pay tribute to your beloved dog in those final days.
Yes. And Becky added, I have to wonder if more senior pets could stay in their homes if their owners felt more comfortable
Yes.
with euthanasia and memorialization options. So you're doing beautiful work, Dr. Cooney, that's helping so many people and pets alike. And we are so grateful to have you as one of our advisory board members, and so grateful for the work that you are doing. And so thank you all for being here. Thank you for everyone who is joining the webinar later, watching a recording, for all of you for supporting the Gray Muzzle organization. And we hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Spoil those pets. And thank you, Dr. Cooney.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.